Hi everyone, my name is Brenda Chepngetich and it's really an honor to present to you guys today. So before I start my presentation, I'd like to tell you about my YouTube channel. So it's called Geoscience Solutions and there I talk about geospatial matters. If you're in this conference today, I know you're someone in this industry. So please support me by subscribing to my channel. The title of my project is Impacts of Land Use Changes on Landscape Patterns and Regulatory Ecosystem Services, and my study area was in Taita Hills in Kenya. So land use and land cover changes, they are a major part in our ecosystem services supply and landscape functions, which we all know it's a multidimensional process that has many driving forces such as the population increase. We all know that the population keeps increasing, and as our population increases, it leads to many land use changes. And these land use changes, they show the impacts of our human activities on land resources. So it's important for us to preserve our ecosystem so as to be able to safeguard sustainable management of our land resources. In these two photos here, the first shows how Taita Hills used to be very many years ago. It used to be a forested area. 70% of Taita Hills was covered by forest. But in the right photo here, this is a sample of how Taita Hills has turned into. The forest has been cut down so as to create farmland areas. As you can see here, you can see in the forest, inside the forest, the farmland areas where people are growing their crops, they're trying to find a way of getting food, and also there are some settlements. People are coming to live here because there's shortage of land, so people are trying to find a way to survive, which makes sense, right? But however, we need to consider our ecosystem. Even though we are trying to look for ways to obtain food, we need to consider that in that process we are destroying our ecosystem. So we need to find a way in which we can still be able to get our needs, but also we are conserving the ecosystem. So my main objective was to be able to quantify these land use changes and see the impacts of that land use change to the landscape pattern and to the ecosystem services. So in my first objective, I did land cover analysis where I used Landsat imagery. I did from 2002, 2011 and 2019. So I used Landsat 7 for 2002, Landsat 5 for 2011 and Landsat 8 for 2019. Then I did classification, and in the end I obtained the land cover maps, and then I did accuracy assessment and then did change detection. So in the end I found that the largest land use change in Taita Hills was agricultural expansion. For objective 2, I used the land cover maps to be able to obtain the landscape patterns in the area. So I did that using the landscape matrix. For objective 3, I wanted to quantify the ecosystem services. So I did 3 ecosystem services, and as I said in my title, they're regulatory ecosystem services. So one of them was sediment retention. We have potential soil loss and also water yield balance. So I used the INVEST model for the sediment retention, sediment export and potential soil loss. I used the INVEST SDR model, that is the sediment ratio model. And then we have the water yield model, which I used to quantify the water yield balance ecosystem service. And in the end, I had the ecosystem service value maps. So after obtaining those 3 results, I did a regression to be able to analyze the relationship between these 3 things. And that led me to quantifying the impacts of these land use changes, impacts on the landscape pattern, and also impacts on the ecosystem service value maps. So some of my results were the land use land cover maps, and as you can see here, I had 5 land cover classes: the forest, the shrubland, built up, cropland, and the bare land area. So as you can see, the dark green here is the forest, and as you can see from 2002, 2011, 2019, it has been decreasing in area, while the cropland on the other hand has been increasing. So as you can see, cropland areas are encroaching into the forest area. And for the landscape pattern results, in this map you can see there are patches, the edges, and the perforated areas and the core areas. So what this means is that, as you can see, from 2002 to 2019, the patch areas, which are in the brown color, it is increasing. That means the number of patches is increasing. That means the land is becoming fragmented. There is landscape fragmentation, which is caused by the encroachment, because initially the forest was a continuous area, but now due to the cutting down, the encroachment, it's turning into patches, and that has reduced the continuity, and that affects the ability of the forest as a natural ecosystem to provide us with the ecosystem services. So that's a bad thing. For the ecosystem services, I have the sediment export, and the boundaries you're seeing here are the watershed boundaries. So I wanted to show how these ecosystem services are varying per watershed. And as you can see, for the sediment export, it was increasing. There are many watersheds that its value of the sediment export is increasing with time. Same as water yield. The water yield was reducing. The ability for the ecosystem to provide us with water was reducing. So after this research, I concluded that there is definitely a significant relationship between land use change, landscape metrics, and ecosystem services. Also, the agricultural expansion, which was by 10%, it led to the decline of forests by 15% due to encroachment. And since forests is a natural ecosystem, definitely the flow of ecosystem services declined. So in the end, it means that fragmentation, the configuration and diversity in landscape patterns could significantly impair the provision of ecosystem services, which clearly it did that. So this research can be applied by land managers in exploring multiple management scenarios and their implication for ecosystem services. And in our decision making and policy making, it means that we have to be able to come up with policies that consider the ecosystem. We have to consider the impact. How does this policy affect our ecosystem? And we can also use this research in land use planning. When we're deciding what to develop in an area, we have to consider how is it going to impact our ecosystem, because we need to preserve our natural ecosystem since it's very important. So that's the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for listening.